And welcome to the latest episode of Talking Cars. I'm Steve Ottley, editor-at-large for TalkCafe.com, and I'm joined, as usual, by my longtime friend and fellow longtime motoring journalist, Scott Newman. Hey, Scott, how's it going?
G'day, Steve. Excited to get into it again today.
Yes. Now, for those who have listened to our first episode, thank you so much for the support. It's been great to see all the feedback. And if you haven't yet, well, that's fine. Be sure to just check it out wherever you do get your podcasts. Now, for the new listeners, the plan each week is for Scott and I to pick an automotive-related topic and create our own personal top 5 list, which we'll then debate, hopefully in an entertaining way. Now, but before we do that, let's talk about what is making news on TalkCafe.com. And, Scotty, the big news lately is the growth of the many Chinese brands that are now in the Australian market. In recent months, we've seen as many as 4 Chinese brands inside the top 10 best-selling makes. So it's clear that Australian buyers are speaking with their wallets. But I'm curious, is this, do you think, a portent of things to come? Or is it a bit of a flash in the pan as buyers take advantage of these sort of very competitive prices that they are offering?
I think it's definitely here to stay. I think there's so much to unpack in this topic, but I think it will probably be unlikely that every brand that's coming into Australia, Chinese or otherwise, sticks around. We just haven't got the critical mass to support all these new brands. But I equally think that multiple Chinese brands in the top 10 is now a fixture. It's just going to happen there. You know, the BYDs, the GWMs, the MGs, they're all well established. They're all on. The growth probably won't continue. I was looking yesterday at BYD, who we'll discuss in a moment, thanks to their announcement, is up 150% year on year. That's not sustainable growth. But equally, they're now 8th for the year on volume and have been running like 5th, 6th, 7th last few months. So, and it's not hard to see why. Like, you know, for you with your enthusiast hat on, you can probably pick holes in it. But for your everyday consumer, they look pretty good. They've got heaps of equipment, they've got long warranties, and the pricing is really, really sharp. So it's not hard to see why they've been so successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the interesting topic, and that's, I guess, where the question marks around sort of the long-term sustainability come in, because it's interesting to see some of the, you know, all of them, frankly, have come in at a very competitive price point. It has led to suggestions that there is subsidies or whatever you want to call it from the Chinese government to, help these brands effectively take market share. We've seen, we've just written a story on Talk Cafe about the federal government is potentially looking at how the free trade agreements work and questioning whether or not we're getting effectively cheap Chinese cars dumped in Australia or really trying to saturate the market to take a significant share. Of course, that's a tried and tested business tactic across all the spectrums of society. But we see it with supermarkets. Once they get effectively a duopoly, they're able to jack the prices up. So I certainly think it's going to be interesting. Personally, I look at it and think that is a sort of in some ways, it's a bit of a questionable complaint, because particularly from Australia, where we had a car industry and we chose not to support it and chose not to subsidise it. So to sit around now and say, oh, well, it's a bit unfair that, they're subsidising. Well, anyone can do that. We subsidise plenty of industries in this country, so there's nothing stopping you. And so it's up to those governments around the world, whether it's China or Europe or America or Korea or Japan, those industries that support, the governments that support their industries are going to have an advantage. And so, at the end of the day, the consumers are the ones getting the choice. Like I say, we've just seen this week again, just written about it. So you can check it out on Talk Cafe. BYD has announced 4 new models in the next, less than 6 months that are coming. And they're already, they've obviously got the BYD Shark 6, which has proven to be a very popular ute. We discussed it last week. It's already amongst the best-selling 4x4 utes. as a plug-in hybrid. It's, something different, and it's something that Australians have clearly embraced. And so I think there's clearly a changing tide in the market. And like you say, I think brands like BYD, GWM, MG, even Chery are likely to become permanent fixtures, and other brands are going to suffer because of that. There's going to be a few brands that everyone's all familiar with that are going to really struggle over the next few years. Yeah,
absolutely. It's that's the thing. The BYD models that are coming too aren't just peripheral. They're not like an MG Cyberster or something like that. They're all big volume brands. We're going to have Australia's cheapest EV by a fair margin, the Atto 1, and then Atto 2, another EV small SUV, and then a couple of plug-in hybrid SUVs in the C lines. So they're all models that could potentially, keep BYD's upward trajectory going. And like you say, every car making company subsidizes their industry. Does China subsidize it to a greater effect? Probably, but that's the decision they've made. And for us, I think it's too late in that the US and Europe have put up a few barriers, which has made Australia even more attractive. But I think we're also geographically, politically, economically too close to China to probably ruffle those feathers.
Yeah.
And they're too well established. Had they come up, 4 or 5 years ago,
yeah,
maybe. But now there's so many cars here. They're so well entrenched. There's so much investment that I don't see how you can turn the taps off now. Or whether, is it a good thing for consumers to turn the taps off? Because probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. It's we've kind of done that, right? Like we've allowed them in. They're here. We, like I say, we have accepted them. It's not like it's not like there's been a lot of pushback, and so, it is what it is. It's neither sort of, to me, it's neither good nor bad. Obviously, there's a lot of political stuff you can talk about it, and trade. It's probably a discussion for political and trade experts and not a couple of guys who just like cars. But I think from an automotive point of view, I just think what is really speaking to Australians and customers is the value. Like cars have gotten more expensive, particularly in the post-COVID era. We saw prices increase, and as those prices have increased, they, with global shipping crisis and steel shortages and semiconductor shortages, they never went down. And so as those problems dissipated, well then, like the prices didn't recorrect. Like I think a lot of car companies realized, well, they used to pay $35,000 for this car, now they'll pay $45,000. Maybe we'll just keep it at 45. So maybe we'll sneak it up to 48 or 50. And so, at the end of the day, consumers have choice. And I think that's what we all want, right? No one wants to be told what you can and can't drive. No one really wants to be told, you have to drive an electric car, or you have to drive a diesel, or you have to drive a ute, or you have to drive a hatchback. We want choice. And I think the biggest thing they do is they give consumers and Australians a value choice. You can choose to buy something that's cheap. They are consistently amongst the cheapest models in any segment they're in. And that, I think, is what is driving their growth, no doubt. And so as long as they maintain that, I think they're in with a very, very strong shot of taking a significant chunk of the market. So yeah, it'll be interesting to watch.
Well, so we talk about the Chinese one staying, but who will they, for want of a better word, kill? It's like, because as you say, a lot of established brands abandoned, they left the hole to fill. The Mazda, and we've seen it recently with the pricing of the new Mitsubishi ASX. Like the ASX was 95 years old, but it still sold really, really well because it worked and had a long warranty and it was cheap. And now obviously the new Renault sourced one, it's gone up like 10 grand. And then they're going to make more margin per car, but all those buyers that wanted a $25,000 to $30,000 small SUV are now going to go buy something else. So, they've made their own bed to a certain extent.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's almost arguably a big debate, and potentially another top 5 list we can discuss in the future. So, but speaking of which, look, so obviously if you want more news, make sure you stay tuned to talkcafe.com, where we will keep you updated with all the latest news and reviews. But the topic for this week frankly, is a topical one, and that is top 5 Bathurst-inspired road cars. Now, obviously, the Bathurst 1000, aka the Great Race, is on again this weekend, and while there is a lot of talk of production relevance with these latest generation of supercars, it's nothing like the old days, right? Of homologation specials and the Group A era, where you had to have a road-going equivalent. So, there are plenty of iconic cars to choose from. We have narrowed it down slightly, I think, within our own list to, I think we agreed Australian cars largely. We sort of skipped the Group A style, Nissan GTRs and things. We've gone with like I say, Bathurst inspired. So it's got to be something that is designed to...
Homegrown.
Yeah, something to win Australia's Great Race. So I'm sure that there's plenty of iconic cars to choose from, so I'm sure there's going to be plenty of arguments and discussion between Scott and I, but as always, we want to hear what you think, so be sure to let us know in the comments. But, green flag, Scotty, what is your number 5?
Okay, I'm going to go first. Right. I'm going to go number 5 with maybe... I am denied about this one, but I've gone with the VNSS Group A, which is maybe not an iconic poster car, but I wanted to give it a shout out because it was the final homologation car. After this, we went to V8 supercars, so we didn't need homologation cars anymore. I think at the time, it didn't... Like, I've spoken to people who drove them in the day. They weren't blown away, so it doesn't have that mythical status, but it was still a pretty special thing. We've got an overhauled engine, the 6-speed manual from the Corvette ZL1, Bilstein dampers, bigger brakes. It was a proper homologation car to try and take on, the GTR and stuff like that. Brought Brocky back into the fold with that awesome lap in 91. It was so expensive as well. I looked at it's an SS Group A. It cost over 170 grand in today's money. So it was basically like a W1 kind of deal.
Yeah.
So actually, before I throw it over to you to see what you think, I wanted to tell a quick story. So they made 302. They were all in red except 3 of them got repainted black. 2 got repainted for Tui's for a promo. Both cars still exist. Another one went to the Sultan of Johor, which is I think in Malaysia. Sorry for our Asian listeners. And the prototypes were white. So non-red VNSS Group A's do exist. There are 3 black ones, a couple of white ones, but most are red. So what do you think, Steve? Cool choice or rubbish?
Very cool choice. I mean, I have a soft spot for it. 91 Bathurst was my the first race I attended.
Wow.
The first Bathurst race I attended. Sadly, I was listening to it on the radio on the way up and heard when Andrew Madecki had a problem with Brock's car in his opening stint and knocked him out of contention. So as a young fella, I was devastated.
Turn around and go home.
I know, but it was, it was still an awesome event. But that car, like you say, it was great that it was, like we're talking about the GTR and the Sierras, they dominated that Group A era, particularly in the second half. And so it was great. It was great that Holden said, we're gonna have a crack at this. We are going to really throw everything at it. And I think it's funny, like you say, I do think of them as soon as you mentioned it, I think of 2 cars. I think of Brock's 05 with the white car with the aero disc front wheel, and then the red. And then it's just red. I can't say personally I've ever seen a black or a white one, particularly in the metal. So that's fascinating to know, mate. That's a fascinating tidbit there. There
you go. I like to give a tidbit. But what's your number 5?
Okay, number 5. I have gone a little bit left field. I thought I'd kick us off with something a little bit strange. And that is a car that actually never raced at Bathurst, but was inspired by Bathurst in every way, shape or form. And that is the Ford Falcon XA GTHO Phase 4.
Very good.
Yeah, so obviously this was that era where we had, obviously we're coming out of that, Ford was doing the HOs, specifically to win on the track. Bathurst was the big deal. And Holden and Ford and even Chrysler at the time were throwing everything at it. They were throwing the kitchen sink at it, and it created the now infamous supercar scare, right? This idea that we were going to have 200 miles an hour road cars, tearing up the streets, a V8 XU1 Tirana, I think as well, was on the cards. But that Phase 4, so it's taken on this sort of mythical status. They only built 4 of them. And I remember we actually many moons ago there was a short-lived motorsport show in Melbourne, and the publication I was working for at the time had a stand, and we were actually fortunate enough to get one of the Phase 4, I believe the Bowden's own, and they brought it down for us, and it was just cool. I'm going to be totally candid. I don't really like the XA Falcons. That 70s era Falcon is not my preferred Falcon. I know a lot of people love it, so I look forward to the comments. But to me, it's taken on this mythical status, and I think it was sort of this ultimate iteration, and it's sort of in some ways, it would have been great. It would have been great to see what happened off the back of it. What had happened with the if this the newspapers hadn't got a hold of it, where we've ended up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the V8 XU1 existed. There were plenty of cool stories from Larry Perkins about, shaking it down on the road, doing 165 miles an hour. And the good thing, the Phase 4, one of the Phase 4s, there was one road car, I think. There was one that got turned into a rally car.
Yes.
And that's just something that's a wild car to go rallying in.
Yes.
And then I think there was a prototype and one other got crashed.
Yeah.
But the other three still exist, I believe. And I'm sort of with you. The 70s Falcons aren't my favourite, but there's also something cool about the Phase 4s. And obviously we've got the RPO 83s, which were bits of Phase 4 that sprinkled out.
Yeah.
And in the right spec, they're a nice looking car, I think, as well. So can't argue with the Phase 4. That's very cool.
Yeah, I think another thing too is that obviously because they're so rare and so sort of mythical, they have become incredibly valuable. I think the last time I saw something, and I stand to be corrected, I think the last one that changed hands went for something like, $1.7 million or something. So they are monstrously, popular amongst collectors, and just to have a really special place in.
If you've got one of those, if you've got that and the HRT 427, it's like you are the big dog Australian collector.
Yeah.
Okay,
so number 4. Yeah, what have you got?
I've just realised that I literally just realised, but thankfully I think if you give me a get out of jail free card, so this car didn't actually race at Bathurst either.
Oh, good. Okay.
But it was heavily Bathurst inspired and it was local, and I think it is a bit of left field, but it's the Mazda RX-7 SP.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I just realised that actually won at Eastern Creek, not at Bathurst.
Yes.
But all the learnings out of Mazda's hat-trick of Bathurst 12-hour victories, 91, 2 and 3, 92, 3 and 4, went into that car. Again, it was all done purely for Australia, 25 cars built, proper homologation special, went over the whole car. They did 127 changes, apparently, over the standard car. And driven to victory by JB and Dick Johnson. So,
two Bathurst legends.
Exactly. And that's the thing. They were the reigning Bathurst champions when they won the 12 hour. So I might be bending the rules a little bit, and I didn't intentionally mean to, but
it's the 12 hour and not the 1000, but that's all right.
But the RX-7, the RX-7 Bathurst R was a special edition as well that came out of that. So I'm claiming it as a Bathurst-inspired homologation special, the Mazda RX-7 SP, to give a different manufacturer a bit of a shout out. Yeah,
okay. I mean, look, I'll allow it.
Thank you.
But if only because I love it. I mean, to be honest, I didn't love the SP as much. I thought the standard cars that they raced the previous 3 years with the smaller rear wing and they just looked so great. I mean, to me, that's one of those cars that I absolutely loved. I went to the 12 hour in 94 when they won again. Those BP liveried cars, they were fantastic. They just
driven that car.
So have I. I was going to say I drove that car. It was at
World Time Attack.
Yes, Sydney Motorsport Park. Yeah, that was fantastic. So just awesome. They say don't meet your heroes, but that was certainly an awesome car to drive. And it
was a beautiful car.
So, look, it's important to remember that, obviously Bathurst has taken on many shapes and forms over the years. We're currently in the bespoke race car era. We started out in a production car era. In many ways, the 12 hour was a way to return the race to those early days where it was really, there wasn't even the showroom showdown, And
so the Bathurst 6 hour now has a huge fit.
Yeah.
It's very popular.
Yeah.
I did think about sneaking the HRT 427 onto the list, but I thought that might have been a stretch too far, given they never actually built the thing.
Yeah, a little bit cheeky, and the race car was always a bit cheeky. But yes, my number 4. Again, we've talked about it, but the original Monaro GTS 327 that won back in the 60s, like we were talking about it last week. So again, if you haven't checked out last week's podcast, make sure you do. But it's hard to talk about Bathurst-inspired cars and not talk about the Monaro and the way that it, like we said last week, it just defined Australian car culture. It didn't even just define Holden culture or Bathurst culture. It defined all of it, and so much of the legend of Bathurst and of Australian motoring is built on the back of the likes of the big V8 coupe, with guys like Bruce McPhee and Barry Mulholland doing the winning, and it's obviously then there was the HK, the HT. They did a lot of winning in that era, and I think, like we said, it set the tone for what was to come for decades afterwards.
And that was a cheeky car as well, because at that stage, Holden, General Motors didn't go motor racing, did it, globally? So there had to be a bit of backroom dealing and a bit of wink, wink, nudge, nudge to actually get the thing onto the start line, I think, because, that's why it was the Holden dealer team.
Yeah, it was the dealer team. Yeah, that's the other thing. And that's the thing.
Holden didn't have anything to do with it. It was the dealers.
Yeah, it's the dealers, all the dealers. I mean, Holden may have pumped a fair bit of cash into it.
There was no Holden involvement whatsoever.
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Yeah, and I think that's fair. And, it established the Holden dealer team, which would go on to be, the standard bearer for set the template that I guess modern supercars has sort of evolved out of. If it wasn't for HDT and it wasn't for HDT, we don't have HSV, you don't have the Holden racing team, you don't have all that dominant era through the sort of from the 90s all the way through the 2000s, and then obviously the sport as we know it would look completely different without HDT. So like I say, it's just
Once again, you can draw a direct line from HK Monaro through to current Camaro supercar. 2-door V8.
Yep.
Same.
Yeah, and it was interesting. They did have that. There was actually, I remember being there for the Gen 3 reveal, and they had the 68 winner there.
Oh, cool.
To try and, I guess, draw that connection. Obviously,
is that the one Lounsey almost crashed a couple of years ago?
No comment on that one, but I do. I mean, obviously, there is not a super significant connection between the two in terms of the actual. You could go and buy. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? You could go and buy a GTS 327 and drive it around. So that's what really helped define it. So, all right. Let's move on to your number 3. What have you got?
Well, it's a very good segue actually, because the Monaro was built to beat this car, and that was the XR Falcon GT. I mean, it started the whole muscle car era. That was the first Australian muscle car, the big V8. Manual shift, and it's important for a few reasons. One, because of that, it set the template for the Australian muscle car, but also it was a very different way of going about winning Bathurst. Because before that, it had been Minis, it had been Alphas, it had been Ford Cortinas, lightweight. You didn't want lots of power, you'd burn up tyres and brakes. Good old wily Harry Firth thought there was a better way. So it's interesting that we think about them dominating in that era, but it sort of didn't. It only just got pole over the Alpha. And okay, it got 1-2, but the Alpha was on the same lap in third. It'd be interesting if it hadn't won, would history be different? I think it still would have had the momentum because there was so much headroom in the V8 era, in the V8 concept. But it was kind of lucky in a way that it became a success first time out and cemented the fact that, hey, you can win with a big car with a massive engine and lots of grunt.
Yeah, like you say, I mean, it is the genesis of the species, right? Like it is the Monaro sort of followed just afterwards, and I guess in part because Ford had done this and shown the way, and so like you say, I mean, it was fascinating. I would love to go back and watch those races again and sort of see the real difference. We get it these days in sort of more of the Bathurst 12 hour, where you see some of these cars that have the legs down the straights, up and down the hill. And then you see the cars like the Porsches have an advantage over the top. And so, but back in those days, it was I'm sure those guys were nursing the brakes and the tyres to get it through, 500 miles and then 1,000 Ks eventually. But, 500 miles in those days is not short. So it was, it's just, I mean, it's hard to have I'm glad you picked it because I didn't, but because it would be very hard to have this list without that car on it because it is so iconic and so transformative. Again, for the whole of the industry, again, you can trace a line from that car to the very last Australian-built,
the FGX,
muscle cars. Yeah, and the Falcons and Commodores. It influenced all of it, and so like the Monaro, it was the Australian. They are the OG muscle cars in Australia, and very much set the tone for what we then had for the
and gold cars. And gold cars are cool.
Gold cars, I don't know. There is something about the Monaro and that particular shade of yellow that's just fascinating.
That pale yellow.
It's like such an un-Holden color, and yet now uniquely Holden.
Yeah.
So go figure.
All right. What you got?
My number 3, a little bit of a personal favorite. Growing up as a Peter Brock fan, it's hard to go past the VK Group A SS. That in part because obviously it spawned an iconic road car in the Blue Meanie. We think of it now as obviously that was we talk about colours of the VM before. That was due to Mobil being Brock's sponsor at the time. But it was a bit like you're talking about with the VN. It was, it was that Group A era had started. We were seeing all these cars come in from around the world. Like Ford didn't have a go at it. They left it to Europe. Ford wasn't involved in racing. Ford Australia wasn't involved in racing deeply, and so they left it to the Mustang, and then eventually, obviously, we got the Sierra. But we had, you had the RX-7s in that era. You had the Jags. You had all sorts of stuff. The BMWs, the Mercedes. There was all these different brands getting involved. And I guess at that point, Holden could have sort of thrown up their hands and said, "Look, we're just a little Australian company. We can't compete with global racing programs." But they went, "Nah, screw it. We're gonna take these guys on head to head." VK won Bathurst in 86 in the hands of Alan Grice and Graham Bailey. It was a successful car. Yeah. It took them on. It won. And that's the thing. That's why for me it's so important. It wasn't just competing. I guess the VN gave it a crack, but it just was not a match for the GTR or the Sierra. And so
it won a couple of not at Bathurst, but it did win a couple of ATCC rounds. So
it was competitive for sure, but not at Bathurst. And I think winning 86, obviously the VL was, I guess, an evolution of VK.
Kind of won in 87. Sort of.
Well, hey, it's got the
trophy.
Brocky's got the trophy, so that's the important thing. And of course, VL, of course, went on and did. I think Gricey took his VK to Europe. Brock and HDT took their cars to Europe to take on things like the Spa 24 hours, and then you had they did take it to the world. But again, like to me, if you say sort of iconic Australian muscle cars through time, it's hard to go past the Blue Meanie. It's such a classic Australian car. It's right up there in my mind with all of these things, everything we talked about last week and everything. It's just such a cool car.
Absolutely.
I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're meant to argue on this thing, but I can't argue with that. Realistically, that probably should be my top 5 instead of the VN. I was thinking about that, but I'm like, bugger it, I'll give the VN some love because the VK gets plenty of love, and as it should, because then it also really played to the Aussie plucky underdog thing. Oh, the Jags are coming with the V12s and all these turbo cars and whatnot. But hey, Brocky and Gricey are still in there. Perkins giving it a red hot go. And it went on to take on the world, like you say. The idea, the sight of a VK at Monza and at Spa and all that sort of didn't, and Silverstone, it didn't sort of, it was very incongruous, but it was a cool era.
And again, it showed like the fact that Grice and Bailey won in 86, I think was really cool to show that, that was an era where, private teams could win. And again, to draw a parallel to now, we sort of have started to see that again, with Erebus and we've seen it with Techno previously. So like, to me, it's just kind of cool that, like we're getting to that point where, those guys could, Australia could build a competitive, Group A touring car and go on a win. And obviously it come off the back of, 85. They weren't prepared, with the end of the Group C era, of course, like the iconic Big Banger going, and you went from this like pumped out, beefcake, VK, like the last of the Big Bangers, to then go to the car in 85 without a rear spoiler or anything. It just looks so sort of anemic,
Yeah.
And so they clearly went, no, we are going to double down, and we're not going to take this line down. We're going to take on, whoever it was, Nissan, BMW, Ford, Mercedes, Volvo. They took on all those brands and they succeeded. And I just think that's really cool, and it sort of speaks to that Australian sort of can-do attitude, and that sort of makes it special for me.
Beautiful. All right. So in number 2,
what have you got?
I've got the LJ Tirana GTR XU1 because. This is another interesting what if for me, because obviously it won in 72. Again, Holden went. It was kind of Harry Firth again. Like you needed a light car. Mm-hmm. And then he said, I think we can win with a big V8. And then suddenly big V8 was a thing, right? Everyone had a big V8. And he went, no, I think there's a better way. Went back to a light car, 300 probably horsepower instead of 400, 450. And the reason I put the XU1 up here so high is this was really the era where the cars got quite potent, but you could still go out and buy a car that was within a handspan of the thing that raced on Sunday, okay? Like a showroom stock XU1 wasn't that different from the car that still raced. It was obviously after this, like we spoke about last week again. By the time we got to A9Xs, the showroom product was quite a big difference from the race product. They were very much optimized cars, whereas here it was still, they could still drive them to the racetrack to run them in if they needed to. But it is another fascinating what if. I think, Brocky won in 72 in that heroic effort, but he was certainly aided by the wet weather.
Yep.
If it had been a dry race, would history be different? Would the GTHO still have beat him up? We'll never know. But it was good that history did work out and the XU1 got its time to shine in the limelight. Certainly was the first big breakthrough for Peter Brock and cemented his legend. So shout out to that. And I think the LC XU1 looks a bit better, but the LJ obviously fixed a lot of that car's right, righted a lot of that car's wrong. So I think it deserves a shout out.
Okay, well, again, I'm going to repeat what you said, and I'm kind of glad you chose it because that was one of the car. That's sort of the one car that just missed the cut on my list. Mm-hmm. One of my I've recently moved house, so I don't have my stuff in the background, but one of my favourite possessions is I have a photograph somewhere that's taken effectively where the modern day podium is at Bathurst. Mm-hmm. It's shooting across the track, and it is literally the checkered flag held high as Brock crosses the line in 72. And I love that photo. It's, again, growing up as a Brock fan, I think that's sort of literally the actual moment, sort of the Brock legend, takes flight. And so, and it has so much to do with that Tirana. It was, like I say, it was wet. That did help. But, he still had to drive, Yeah,
like heroic car control, underdog car against the V8, big Ford V8s, factory V8s against the bad guy, Alan Moffat. Sometimes motorsport writes its own stories.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at even just looking at the qualifying for that, there's 4 Falcons in the top 4. No, a lot of guys obviously drove solo then, so the solo thing's not so big, but they just were, they really were up against it. Like say, Harry Firth had sort of tried to take that tact of, well, can we make tried to merge the two things, like classic Harry Firth trying to be that wily operator where he's tried to take the best of both worlds. Can we have a small, lighter car that handles, but give it a 6-cylinder power rather than a V8? And will that be enough to sort of balance out the two, sort of combine the two characteristics to get to sort of outfox Ford? And so it was interesting, but it gave birth to to the legend of Brock, which is so important to Bathurst, but just a cool car, just a straight up, just one of the great cars of Australian motoring history. So, no, good choice. And that does segue quite nicely into my number 2.
God, we're good at this.
Yeah, we should do a podcast together. And that is the Tirana SLR 5000 A9X, which, again, I mentioned last week, but again, we'll do a non-Holden-related topic soon, I promise. But again, I just couldn't do a list without a Bathurst-inspired cars. Without that car, like, again, it was such an iconic car, such a hugely successful car. Like back-to-back Bathurst wins. Obviously Brock's famous 79 win by 6 laps. I think we'd all I can only imagine the headlines on our friends at Speed Cafe if someone won the Bathurst 1000 by 6 laps. Everyone would be calling it a snooze fest or whatever. Yeah. But but again, like it's the man, the myth, the legend. But the fact that he set the fastest lap on the last lap of the race, and that showed a certain degree of confidence in that car. And so I just think, again, what we've talked about, that evolution of from the XU1, getting the handling right, and then, obviously through that era, there was other, great Tiranas through the 70s, and then to come to the A9X eventually was just, again, I think the pinnacle of that era, and again, something you could just drive. It was an option for the car, obviously designed for the racetrack. But the way the rules were, it had to be an option. So it wasn't like it wasn't just something the Holden dealer team whipped up at the shop and was only available in those handful of the factory left cars. It was just something that was there and it was available. And even now, every time I see one now, I kind of you kind of got to stop and stare at it. It's such a just a cool shape. I just love sort of everything about it.
And that's the thing, I've said that a few times, that by this stage, like the stock A9X was quite mild compared to the race cars. But equally, that means that the fact that it's a homologation special means it was not difficult at all to turn your stock A9X. Like, they couldn't sell that for various reasons, but it wasn't difficult at all to then turn your car into a copy of the race car, to give it 450 horsepower, stick big wheels on it because it had the flares. The suspension geometry was all there, ready to go. They just didn't need to, otherwise they were still too scared of the headlines, I think, to actually put a 175 mile an hour racing car on the road again, but they still managed to do it. And again, it was another, Brock had left HCT, won Bathurst as a privateer, come back to the fold again.
Yep.
You got these amazing stories that are linked to these cars that make them such legends. It's more than just their pure performance or the way they look.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of going back to the beginning there, like with the supercar scare, it's like we kind of got back there with A9X, and I sort of do wonder if we don't have the scare and we don't have the media beat up at the time, and then, do we get to something like the A9X sooner? Do we get to that in the mid-70s? I mean, I think they were, like I say, they were already working on a V8 XU1, and so I think we would have probably got there sooner, and who knows where we were at by the end of the 70s if we didn't, because such a cool car, and such an extreme take on the concept by the end of the decade. So
we might have had road going sports sedans. I don't know.
That would have been something. All right.
What do you reckon the chances are our number one's the same? Pretty high, I reckon.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Phase 3.
Phase 3, yeah. There you go.
It's the only choice. We both would have been really controversial if we'd done a top 5 without putting the Phase 3 on there. I'm going to give you. I
think any lower than number 1 is probably controversial too. Again, even Holden fans are probably begrudgingly admitting that the Phase 3 is arguably the most iconic car to come out of this era of Bathurst.
So I did a big feature about Bathurst quite early on in my career, but I got to speak to Fred Gibson and Alan Moffat and stuff like that, the OGs. And Alan Moffat said about the Phase 3s, it's the only time I've seen grown men from Holden cry in the pit lane because they knew they were never going to beat this car. So I'm going to give you, before I turn the floor over to you, I'm going to give you my favourite Phase 3 facts.
Yeah.
So his pole time in 71, so in 1970 he drove the Phase 2 and won, but his pole time in 71, a year later, was 11 seconds faster than the Phase 2 in 1 year. That is
absolutely bonkers.
And it was 24 seconds faster than the XR 4 years earlier. Like imagine today if a car went 24 seconds faster in any motorsport series in the case of 4 years, it just shows how potent and what a big step up that car was in terms of its performance. It wasn't expensive. Like it was 70 grand in today's money. Like I talked about the VN before, was really, really expensive. Like it wasn't a huge amount of money in today's money. Like it was about the same as an XR8 was, sort of thing. So, it's got to be a Phase 3. They're my cool stats. Turn the floor over to you to talk about how cool this car is.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, obviously, it has taken on a legendary life of its own. It's often to me, it's sort of again the intangibles. Like it was called the fastest four-door sedan for decades, right? Mm-hmm. Whether or not it actually was, I think you'd know better than me. Wheels magazine they tested it, didn't they, back in the 70s and hit about 140 miles an hour.
Yeah, so it was on the
road.
They did the HO down the Hume story, and it was actually on the rev limiter at 144 or 3 or something like that. So it would have gone faster. What is funny is that the Wheels actually got better performance numbers out of an E49 Charger by a fraction than the HO, so that was a faster car, and it gets murky around the Benzes. You know, the what was it, 300 SEL 6.3 and then the 6.9. Yeah. But regardless, it was a very, very... It was one of the fastest four doors in the world.
It was one of the fastest four doors in the world for a period.
And it wasn't that much money. It was $5,200, like compared to a Merc or whatever. It was a bargain.
Yeah, and it was a homegrown car, right? It was an Aussie built car. You know, I know it obviously had the Cleveland engine, which I believe they understated, right? There was again, there was obviously, this was pre-supercar scale, obviously being the Phase 3, but that was obviously, you had to deal with politicians and insurers and those sorts of things. So you do have to be careful. They had to be careful with the car. And I think it was somewhere above 350 horsepower, which is super impressive again for the time. But like you say, it was just like transformative. Like I said, 24 seconds. I mean, that's like, someone going out and setting pole this year in this weekend's race at, like a 140 or something.
It's like the difference between like a current supercar and an F1 car at Bathurst, really.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that gets lost is just like you think, Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3 or whatever, Phase 1. How different could they really be? And it was like, it was a quantum leap forward from Phase 2. And so, like I say, even if you're a diehard Holden man, you've got to stop and tip your cap to what was just an epic car, and like built to win Bathurst, that's what it existed for. And so,
it's probably relevant to mention at this point, I have actually driven one.
Oh, really?
Yes, I have.
Well, in that case, let's just cancel. Let's just stop the podcast. I need to hear this, Stone. It's making me jealous. No. When was that?
When I did the TV series at a former employer, we did. We got the two Holy. It was when the Prem car Holy Grail came out, so we brought that together, and that was kind of the modern HO. And we found a very kind owner that lent us his Phase 3, genuine Phase 3, with a vinyl roof, no less. Very rare option. And I did a story with John Bauer about it. He drove it. I didn't drive it on camera, but he was there and he said, look, you got to have a drive. So I didn't drive it very far or very fast or anything like that. But if you're given the opportunity, you got to do these things. So, and I mean, it's one of those things, like, is it fantastic to drive? Not really. Like it's it's got heavy steering and heavy brakes and the suspension clunks and stuff like that. But that's part of it. And
it's of the era, right?
Yeah, it's of the era.
That's the thing, right?
And that's the one thing it does have, even by modern standards, is a stonking engine. Like it felt as fast as probably like a VESS. But with 1970s tyres and brakes, which is more than fast enough. Thank you very much. And 4-speed gearbox that you got to get right. You've really got to drive the thing, and no way I'd want to go fast in it. like by today's standards. So that's the thing. Anyone that went fast in those things really earned their money. So
yeah. I mean, look, it's cool. It's like in some ways it's a bit of it's no doubt it's like modern supercars are fantastic in the sense that they're fast and reliable, and it's easy for teams to work on them and all that sort of thing, and they're safer than they've ever been before. I'm sure as heck wouldn't want to crash a Phase 3 or an A9X, aside from the value the money you're flushing down the toilet, but just from a pure safety perspective, mildly terrifying. But it is in some ways sad that we don't have this level of sort of crossover anymore. Yeah. I think, it's cool. Like one of the coolest cars I've seen in recent years is that Ford Mustang GTD, which I was very fortunate to speak to Ford Global President Jim Farley at the very the first reveal of this generation S650 Mustang in Detroit a few years ago, and he. At the time, that's when they unveiled the Dark Horse, and they said, look, this is we're going back to Le Mans with this car, and then the Dark Horse is going to be this new hero model. And he then sort of, just with a mild prompt in, said, we're going to do something more special, because if you've got to go to Le Mans, you've got to have something, that fit in for that, like for homologation and things. You're like, well, you don't need to, actually. This car is fine. You can homologate this car into a race car, and that's sure enough, that's what they did. But Farley, I'm a huge fan of him. I think he is a genuine car guy running a car company. And he got it. And he, from my understanding, is that GTD, which is, for those who haven't seen it, it is effectively, a Ford Mustang, Porsche 911 GT3 crossover. You know, like it's like if you sent those two cars out on the town, gave them a few drinks, and then 9 months later, out pops the baby Mustang GTD. That is, it's got a transaxle, it's got a different engine, it's got the aero from the
inboard suspension.
Inboard suspension. Like, it is just amazing. I got to see it up close at Le Mans a few years ago, and it is absolutely wild, the level of detail in it. And that's really what we're talking about here with these Bathurst-inspired cars. Is things like the GTD is the modern version of an A9X or a Phase 3 or some of these cars, even the Group A.
We'll see it next year as well when the Ford Mustang One Make Race Series starts. Yeah. They are effectively road cars with a few tickles, like a roll cage, a little bit of suspension, geometry, and that's about it. So the fact that, suddenly you can basically drive to the track in your Dark Horse road car, get in the race car, and they're not that much different. So it's a lot rarer now in motorsport, not just supercars. We're not just picking out supercars here, pretty much all motorsport, which is a shame. But thankfully, Ford's continuing that. So good on them for getting number one on our list.
Yeah. Look, I think I think both those lists were great. I think let's be honest. Aside from number one, it's one of those lists where it's hard to get it too wrong. Yeah. And so, because there are so many iconic cars. Okay, but that's our say. Do you agree, listeners? Are you a Holden fan steaming at the ears that that a Ford was number one? Are you a Ford fan who's annoyed that there's just too many Holdens mentioned and you want more Ford? Let us know. Let us know in the comments. We want to know your thoughts on what are your top 5 Bathurst specials. So join the conversation either in the comments or on social media. But that's it for another episode. Hope you enjoyed the chat. Thanks for listening. Scotty, as always, thanks for your thoughts and knowledge and unfortunate stories of driving cars that I wish I'd driven. So,
pleasure.
Looking forward to the next one. All right. Thanks, everyone. Stay tuned till next time.